Okay, so I'm late, or I'm early. I'm probably late. So I was just talking to Juma Jordan and Isela Garcia, so I'm a little bit manic and a little bit off topic. But I've been promising for like 2 weeks to talk to you all about assessment during the pandemic. And so I put a lot of thoughts and notes together earlier today, and then my mind keeps shifting. So I'm just going to share a couple of things to get it started, mostly because I promised that I would jump on Facebook Live, and then mostly just tell you that I'm going to have stuff for you later. How's that? So I want to, I just forgot my other notebook. But anyway, when I was thinking about what Ijuma just said a few minutes ago was that what we need are different systems, not that we have to throw out all of our tools. And so when you think about assessment and progress monitoring of preschoolers during this pandemic, that really struck me that the system needs to change. Like there were so many things that are now amplified and magnified. I'm stealing all of Ijuma's words, but when we think about assessment practices a month ago, there were a lot of things that were broken about them. We didn't involve families as true partners. And I don't want to sound that I'm judging. I'm just sort of calling out some truth of places that we've struggled as an entire field. Not that every one of us has struggled, but we've really struggled between the transition from early intervention to preschool. We've really transitioned from, struggled with the transition from preschool to kindergarten. Why were those such, disruptive transitions, especially around this point of assessment and progress monitoring? And so all of you that work in Part C and Part B know that we have struggled with our colleagues on either side of those transitions. So why is that? A lot of us have said we haven't really done partnering with families in ways that now during the pandemic we're like, how do we partner with families? How do we coach families? How do we be in relation and community with families? Because we weren't doing it earlier. A lot, just yesterday I was talking to evaluation teams and they were saying, well, what are we going to do about kindergarten transitions? And I was listening to them and they're like, how are we going to send information to kindergarten teachers when we haven't been able to do the Teaching Strategies Gold spring administration? What will we tell kindergarten teachers? We're going to have to rely on what parents are saying. And I was like, we are. And there was like this lack of trust. But then it was deeper than that. It was like, but we don't always get to talk to families, or it's hard to talk to families, or families aren't in a space to talk back with us. So as I was channeling Ijuma's comments, it was really helping me remember that a lot of what was discomforting or inequitable or problematic about our assessment practices in early intervention, early childhood special ed, or in our rush to get kids ready for kindergarten really is now being magnified and amplified. And so if we want different systems, if we want to take this as an opportunity to say, hey, what is really working about our assessment practices? Let's hold on to those for dear life. Let's not let go of those. But let's also be really honest about what wasn't working. All the labeling of kids, the standard deviations, the standardized testing, the over-testing, the reliance on kindergarten readiness, the lack of cohesion between early intervention, early childhood, and then kindergarten. I don't think that was working for us. So today, I just wanted to jump on and sort of set the stage for what's going to come. Pat Radel, who was the lawyer that was on the special bonus Pre-K Teach and Play podcast with me a couple of weeks ago. I don't know when. He and I are going to jump on a conversation again next week. So be watching for that. I want to get an update on anything new around serving preschoolers on IEPs during COVID-19. But I want to go deeper into what wiggle room do teams have during this pandemic to do assessment differently, especially if their state rules require a standardized test. You all know that we call it standardized norm referenced as if it's one thing. But by standardized, I mean something like the Battelle Developmental Inventory or the Preschool Language Scale, something that you have to have a script or certain materials that comes in a box. And people are like, how are we going to do that virtually? And how are we going to be able to trust families? And preschoolers are saying, how am I going to trust those early interventionists? What do they know? And kindergartners are like, what am I going to say about those preschool teachers? What do they know? So we're always like a little bit distrustful. There's this big word called incontrovertible index. It's the truth. And we often think that we are the truth. And so people are like, well, if I don't see it, how will I know it's really true? And if I don't have a way to talk to families, there's a language barrier, there's technology barriers, we don't have a relationship. How will I get trustworthy data from them? So the thing I want you to be thinking about as you're engaging in assessment and progress monitoring, whether that's screening of kids, whether that's eligibility determination, whether that's progress monitoring. I was talking to a revolutionary from Florida today, and she's like, how do we do progress monitoring for SDI minutes? And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many things to say, because really, do you have IEP worthy goals in the first place that even warrant doing progress monitoring? And then what is important to progress monitor right now? Are you just feeling like you want to be compliant? And we said that we would collect 3 out of 15 trials daily. So now teachers are being forced to figure out a way to kick 3 out of 15 trials through Zoom. I don't know, like we've kind of lost our way sometimes in our rush to, what I've been saying, recreate a system in a virtual space. And so I would love to invite us to say, maybe we don't need to recreate a system that was broken, and we need to keep some of the tools that we know. So we always leverage what we know when we're doing something that is uncertain. So what do we know about good assessment and good progress monitoring? So I want you to, I've got it somewhere here. If you guys don't know our work around the linking, I put some links in on Facebook on the event for today, and I'll make sure that you get them if you need them. But there are 8 standards. You could also look to the DEC recommended practices. That's the Division for Early Childhood. You could look at NAEYC. All of that is good. But these 8 standards really ground us. So as you're thinking about, are we doing good progress monitoring? Are we doing good assessment? I would invite you to take the word good out of the sentence, and I would replace it with 8 things. And I can never remember the standards myself, so I wrote them down. How's that? Because I have COVID brain, and I don't mean to make light of a virus, but it means that my brain is really tired and taxed, okay? So the first one, I'm going to read them and then I'm just going to highlight a couple. Acceptability, authenticity, collaboration, evidence, multifactored, sensitivity, universality, and utility. Okay? And so I put a link in the Facebook group, in the Facebook event, that's our linking survey, so that you can actually adapt the survey a little bit and apply it to your practices right now. So whether you're doing progress monitoring of preschooler IEP goals, or you're doing eligibility, or you're doing kindergarten transitions, or you're doing Part B to Part C, or rather Part C to Part B, these 8 standards are the tools that you can hold on to, but you want to think about a different system. We want to, the phrase I like is from Colorado, and when they're doing eligibility, they say, have we created a body of evidence? So instead of going, did I do an observation in 2 settings? Did I use multiple methods? Did I use a standardized norm referenced assessment that I can get a standard score and compare that to a mean and get so many standard deviations? Right? How can we get a body of evidence to make decisions that meet these 8 standards? So one of the standards is authentic. And so that's a big one that I talk about all the time. So what do we mean by authentic? Is it familiar people in familiar settings with familiar objects doing familiar things? So right now, if a kid is at home with their caregivers, with their toys, I don't care what the toys are, that's authentic. And so is that trustworthy? Absolutely. Is it even actually more trustworthy than a standardized test that we do in a clinic setting? Also, yeah, sorry. I don't mean to be offensive to anybody who likes doing testing in a clinic setting or feels like that gets at the truth. But what we know from the research is that standardized testing, especially under the age of 10, really is questionable in terms of the scores and interpretations being valid or reliable. So the second one that I'm going to mention today of the linking standards is there an evidence? Is there an evidence base to support that we are making decisions or that there are scores being produced that are accurate and trustworthy and replicable? I can't talk either. So that's valid. Is that reliable? And so we've been using a lot of assessments that have no evidence base, and especially around eligibility. But we would say to ourselves, but we have to, because we have to administer a standardized tool. So I want this to be an opportunity for any of you who are child find teams, any of you who are involved in passing a child from one service delivery to the next, so whether that's part C to B, B to school age, I want you to really be thinking about what things are serving you, which tools in your toolbox are good. Like, are you a really good observer? Are you a good interviewer? Are you a good dot connector? Are you a good person that can write up a summary that shows all the beautiful things this child can do? Keep holding on to those tools and keep holding on to these 8 standards that you can be authentic, acceptable, universally designed, evidence-based, multi-factored. I can't get all 8 of them, but they're on our Facebook page. Those are the things that hold still, but we don't try to recreate our exact way of doing eligibility a month ago and do that now. And so I'll get Pat Radel to talk a little bit more from a legal perspective so people don't worry that they're going to be in trouble because we're not doing what our rule says we must do. But really what we're bound to, even if you go all the way back to federal law, is that we don't want to use assessments that are biased, and we want to do assessments that help us find out what a child needs to access, participate, and make progress in daily activities. Well, where else might we look to see how a child's participating in daily activities? So I've even been hearing that people are like, maybe we should delay eligibility until we can observe your child in an educational setting. I've been digging, and if anybody can find it, please share it with me. I cannot find anywhere in federal law where it says that a child must be observed in an educational setting in order to determine eligibility under IDEA. There is some language around if the child is going to school or is in a I forgot the words and I was going to memorize it before we got on. There is a little bit of language, and I'll put it back in the Facebook show notes, that talks about if the kid's in school, you would observe them in school. I'm paraphrasing, but what that's saying is, like, if you're a 5th grader and I'm going to determine if you have a specific learning disability, I should probably look how you're doing in school before I decide you have a specific learning disability. But when we're talking about preschool, we're not even talking about school. I know we talk about it because that's where a lot of 3, 4s, and 5s with IEPs get served, is through the school district. But federal law talks about daily activities. And so all along, even since 2004, the obligation was what's keeping this child from accessing, participating, and making progress in daily activities. It was never how will they perform in group structured care in a public school building. That was never the question. So it shouldn't be anything wonky to determine eligibility now that children may be quarantined or in non-school settings, because the question never was, what do you need from the school district for a 2.5-hour early childhood special ed program? Does that make sense? So maybe give me a thumbs up or a heart if some of this is making sense. I know I'm talking fast because I have lots of ideas in my head, but the mission today is to get the conversation started, that we need different systems when we re-enter, when we reunite, when we re-emerge. I don't know what my re-word is yet, but we need a different system. It was always inequitable. It was always heavy and biased. It was always grounded in white dominant culture. It was always marginalizing people more. That might be hard to hear because we work incredibly hard as evaluation teams. We work incredibly hard to find children and make them eligible and get them the supports and services they need. And so what Ijuma would remind us again is that one of our agreements is that we are accountable for our impact, not our intention. So our intention of early intervention, early child special ed, is to find you early and to support you in a way that will help you thrive. If the impact by my state rules of having to do standardized testing, of having to do things in a timeline that is really rigid and causes people to feel fear and to be rushed and not to be able to form relationships, then that impact is actually harmful. So that's the premise of a different system is warranted. But that doesn't mean that we weren't doing amazing things. It doesn't mean that many of you haven't forged really strong relationships with your kindergarten counterparts and or your Part C counterparts, or work tirelessly to be in community with your families, or pick tools that are really authentic. So many of you use like the transdisciplinary play-based assessment, or you use the TS Gold, or you use the AEPS. So we can still use some of our tools that we have in our toolkit and still dream and push for a different system. So I want you to hold on to one of your tools in your toolkit are the 8 linking standards. So when you're trying to think about what should assessment look like, maybe the question is, what might assessment look like? What do we want assessment to look like? How can we use this as an opportunity to make sure that it is more equitable, that it is more evidence-based, that it is more universal, that it is more authentic? And so what I'm going to do each week is try to give you something really concrete to help you in those different things around assessment, from screening to eligibility to progress monitoring. But today, because I've been putting it off for 2 weeks, I wanted to start with grounding you a little bit in the idea that we've got some things that we can hold on to. Okay, so hopefully that helps just a little tiny bit. I put a couple of articles in the Facebook event for this Facebook Live that you can read some of our work and research around the linking standards. I put the linking survey so that you know what each of those standards means, and then you can apply that to your practice. And so whether you're doing a team meeting through Zoom, whether you're doing a parent interview that's paper format, whether you're doing some sort of data collection that parents do and caregivers do and send back. Oh, my dog's like, I've had enough of Facebook Live, sorry. So we're gonna have to go. But that you want to hold it against those 8 standards and really know that what you're doing, it's the impact, not the intention, and that we don't want to give ourselves more pressure to run out and recreate a whole new assessment process and progress monitoring process, but really think about what's working well that we can hold on to, and what do we need to let go because it never was working. All right, so keep your questions coming. Let me know what you need, and I'll do my best to be of service and let my dog out. Okay, bye guys.